Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something pretty important for India's aviation scene, the Protection of Interests in Aircraft Objects Bill 2025.
That's right, a big one.
And look, if you're studying for the UPSC exams, this is definitely something to get your head around. It touches on economic growth, foreign investment, maybe even how much we pay for flights down the line. It really gives insight into India's approach to international norms, attracting investment key stuff for governance, economic policy in mains, maybe even prelims questions popping up.
Absolutely, it's core policy in action.
So our plan today, unpack this bill, figure out the main takeaways, see what it really means for aviation in India. We're drawing on reporting from the Hindu for this.
Sounds good. And, to really get why this bill is happening now, you have to look at the problems it's trying to solve.
Right, the backstory.
Exactly. Think about Go First last year, 2023, or even going back further, Kingfisher Airlines.
Ah, yes, those situations.
In both cases, you had aircraft lessors, the companies that actually own the planes, facing real trouble getting their aircraft back when the airlines hit financial problems.
Because of domestic legal hurdles.
Precisely. Things like court-imposed moratoriums during insolvency, they just blocked repossession.
So the planes were stuck, basically. And I remember reading about India's compliance score with the Cape Town Protocol being low because of this.
Yeah, it was pretty low. Started at 50 on the Aviation Working Group's index. It's up to 62 now, apparently, after the bill passed.
Okay, an improvement.
An improvement, and the hope is it climbs higher. But it just shows there was a gap, a need to align better with how things are done globally.
Which brings us to the Cape Town Convention and Protocol.
Exactly. That's the international backdrop. This bill is fundamentally about India fully implementing that convention and its protocol.
Which is a UN treaty under ICAO, right, from 2001.
That's the one. India actually joined back in 2008, signaled intent.
But joining is one thing, enforcing it domestically is another.
Precisely. We lacked that robust domestic mechanism. The law on the ground didn't fully back up the international commitment. This bill aims to fix that.
So it's about building credibility internationally, making India a more reliable place for, say, foreign lessors.
Absolutely. Credibility is huge. Aviation is incredibly capital intensive. You need investors, lessors to feel secure. Adhering to global standards like Cape Town is key for that.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. What are the key provisions in this bill?
Well, first off, it names the DGCA, the Director General of Civil Aviation, as the registry authority.
Okay, so the DGCA gets a new job.
A central one. They'll manage the records for aircraft objects, the planes, engines, that sort of thing, and handle the registration of these international interests under the convention.
Makes sense to have a central registry. What else?
It also requires airlines to submit records of their dues, their outstanding payments related to these aircraft.
Ah, more transparency. That sounds useful for lessors.
Very useful. Gives them a clearer picture. But probably the headline provision for lessors is the right to repossess aircraft much faster.
How much faster?
The bill sets a time frame, within 2 months of a default.
2 months. Wow, okay. Compared to the potentially years-long battles we saw before, that's a big shift.
A massive shift. Think back to Go First. The lessors were fighting just to inspect their planes, let alone take them back.
Yeah.
2 months provides real certainty.
And crucially, how does this interact with other laws, like the insolvency code?
That's perhaps the most critical part legally. The bill explicitly states that its provisions regarding repossession will override conflicting laws.
Specifically mentioning the IBC.
Yes, specifically the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So, in the past, the IBC's moratorium could halt repossession. Now, this bill carves out an exception for aircraft.
So the Cape Town principles, via this bill, get priority over the general insolvency process when it comes to getting the plane back.
That's the essence of it. It strengthens the lessor's position significantly, reduces their risk when leasing to Indian carriers.
Right. So with these changes in place, what's the expected ripple effect? What are the big potential benefits?
Well, the most immediate hope is, as we touched on, increased investor confidence.
Makes sense. Less risk, more confidence.
Exactly. A clearer, faster process for asset recovery makes India, hopefully, a more attractive market for aircraft leasing companies. This could potentially lead to more capital flowing in, maybe even more sophisticated financing options becoming available here.
And the Hindu's report mentioned the civil aviation minister estimating lower leasing costs, something like 8 to 10%.
Yes, that figure was mentioned. The logic is, if the risk for lessors goes down, they might pass on some of that saving through lower lease rates.
And the potential knock-on effect being cheaper air tickets for us.
That's the optimistic extension, yes. The
Yep.
minister suggested it could happen, but it's worth noting the industry seems a bit more reserved on that direct link.
Yeah, I can imagine. Airfares depend on so many things. Fuel, competition, demand.
All of that. Lease rates are just one component, albeit a significant one. But the industry view seems to be that factors like the airline's own financial health are maybe more decisive for lease terms.
Okay. What other benefits are anticipated? There was talk about Gift City.
Ah, yes, Gift City in Gujarat. The idea is that by simplifying the legal side of leasing and repossession, this bill could make Gift City a more attractive base for aircraft leasing operations.
Attracting foreign lessors to set up shop there.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Building a domestic leasing hub is definitely part of the ambition, reduces reliance on overseas lessors over time.
So it's about building a whole ecosystem, not just importing planes.
Precisely. And beyond the economics, it's about enhancing India's standing internationally, aligning with ICAO norms, showing commitment. Plus, streamlined repossession might mean better terms for newer or regional airlines, too, who might otherwise be seen as riskier.
Okay, so mostly positive signals. But legislation like this rarely comes without some lingering questions or concerns. What are the reservations, particularly from the international listers?
That's important for a balanced view. While the bill itself is seen as a major step, there are still worries. A big one is India's tax system.
Taxation, always complex.
It is. There's concern that even with easier repossession, foreign lessors might face, complex or potentially high tax burdens here that could eat into the benefits.
Any specific tax issues flagged?
The report mentioned a lack of clarity around SPV special purpose vehicles. These are commonly used in aircraft deals, kind of like holding companies.
Right.
There's apparently still some uncertainty about how these SPVs will be taxed in India and if that structure will be efficient. That kind of uncertainty can still be a drag.
Okay, so tax clarity is still needed.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the skepticism about lower airfares earlier. What's the core argument there from the lessor side?
Well, they basically argue that lease rates, while important, aren't the be-all and end-all. An airline's overall creditworthiness, its size, its order book, its growth plans, these factors often weigh much more heavily when setting terms.
So a strong airline, like, say, Indigo or Air India, might already get good terms regardless.
That's the kind of example they point to, yes. Their market position and financial standing are powerful negotiating tools already. So while the bill helps on the margins and reduces downside risk, it might not dramatically change the rates for the biggest players.
Okay, so it's a significant piece of the puzzle, addresses a major past problem, but maybe not a silver bullet for everything in the sector.
That seems a fair summary. It tackles a critical legal bottleneck, but the broader economic environment, taxation, airline health, those all still matter immensely.
Right. And pulling this back for our UPSC aspirants listening in, understanding this bill, its context, its provisions, its intended effects, and even the remaining concerns, it's really valuable.
Definitely.
You see how international conventions translate into domestic law, how policy tries to solve real-world problems like stalled investments, the interplay between law and economics in a key infrastructure sector like aviation.
It connects directly to syllabus areas like economic development, governance reforms, India's engagement with international institutions like ICAO.
And thinking critically about it, weighing the benefits mentioned by the government against the concerns raised by industry, as reported in the Hindu, that shows the analytical depth needed for the mains.
Exactly. It's not just knowing what the bill is, but understanding why it exists and what its real-world impact might be, including the limitations.
So wrapping this up then, our deep dive suggests the Protection of Interests in Aircraft Objects Bill 2025 is really about creating legal predictability.
Making India a safer bet for aircraft lessors.
By fully adopting the Cape Town Convention principles, especially in faster repossession and overriding conflicting domestic laws like the IBC in that specific context, it aims to fix problems seen in cases like Go First and boost India's standing.
And supports the wider ambition of developing India, not just as a place where airlines operate, but where the complex business of aircraft leasing also thrives, perhaps centered around places like Gift City.
Okay, so a final thought for our listeners to mull over. This bill is a big step, clearly. But looking ahead, what other reforms, maybe regulatory, maybe tax-related, might still be needed for India to truly become a top-tier global aviation hub? And what challenges could pop up during the implementation of this new law? Something to keep thinking about for your UPSC prep.
Good questions. The policy journey rarely ends with just one piece of legislation.
Indeed. Well, that's all we have time for on this deep dive. If you found this breakdown useful for your UPSC studies, please do hit like and subscribe for more analysis of current affairs.
And drop a comment below if you have questions or ideas for future topics you'd like us to tackle.
And just a reminder, our discussion was based on reporting from The Hindu. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.